we're going to discuss startup engagement programs here. We use startup programs as a short version of that. What we mean by that is, every organization has the problem of ambidexterity, that is the ability to deliver on the core business and core activities, even if you're a government, and the ability to self-innovate the organization. And this can be done by the book in three different ways. One is you build, so you use your internal R&D or everything, your like skunk works. It can be completely inside, a bit outside. You can buy, so you can grow inorganically and buy innovation through acquisition, and that's at the right end of the spectrum, the M&A that you see on the right side of the slide. Or
Paolo, we don't see the slides yet.
Oh, you don't see the slides?
Yeah.
Thank you, Frank.
There we are. There we are. Okay.
Right. And so build, buy, or partner. That's the title of the slide. I was at Partner. So Partner is not just a hybrid. It's different. It's a way to tap into things and innovation that has not been thought for you, and obviously needs some adaptation to enter your organization and innovate your organization. So that complicates the things with respect to other patterns. It's got every of these patterns, every one has got its peculiarities, pros and cons. It's not that one is better than the other. We're not gonna say that partnering is better than building or buying. It just depends on your strategy and how you mix these elements. But today, what we are really gonna focus on is partnering with startups. So how your organization, to solve ambidexterity, can engage with external startups to innovate. And just a terminology point here, what are startup programs? Well, they are everything that encompasses incubators, accelerators, challenges, corporate venture funds, hackathons, collaboration platforms, venture clients, and there are many more names out there. Everyone with a different nuance, but in general, we use the term startup program to encompass all of these, and they are programs that are made to engage with the external startup ecosystem and the startup community around your organization to get to a partnership between your organization and a startup of some kind. And if you think about it, they're very different, right? So accelerators, corporate venture funds, hackathons are very different, but they all have common traits that we call features. One example is they all have a very defined duration, beginning and an end. Most of them have two, if not all three of these stages. A recruitment stage where startups get identified from the external community and brought into the program with an admission process. And then there's an activation stage where you do something with the startups, and you can ask them to pilot a project with you or other things. And then there's a follow-on stage after a graduation. There is another funnel there, and the follow-on can include other activities, for example, integration of the pilot in your organization. And another example of, the partnership can happen at different stages. In the last example I gave, so the integration after the pilot, that is the longest arrow that you see there. So the real partnership happens in the follow-on, but it's activated in the activation stage. There are other examples like hackathons, where you only engage startups for like 2 or 3 days, or challenges where you engage them for 3 months, and there the partnership happens during the activation stage. And rarely, it could happen also in the recruitment stage. And then there are various features here as well that are in common. Funding, for example, is usually involved in all of these programs. It can happen at the beginning of the activation stage, like in accelerators. It can happen happen at the end as a prize, like in hackathons or challenges, or it can be distributed throughout the activation stage, like in incubators. Take another example of education and mentorship. That usually happens during the activation stage. Think of accelerators or hackathons, but more and more, there are programs like Zinc in the UK that is targeting researchers, or Oasis 500 in Jordan that operates in an ecosystem that needs some education, that put education and mentorship already in the recruitment stage. And that can also be in the follow-on stage, like, for example, alumni activities or mentorship for alumni. So the point here is that there are features and that allow to create a design space around startup programs that can be flexible enough to address different needs and different goals depending on what you want specifically to achieve. And other features beyond those I mentioned before, funding and education, are the location and how you do the admission process, the graduation process, whether you give office space or access to labs or manufacturing or anything like this. Now, a question we got asked really often during our research was, is there a holy grail? Is there a program that is better than others all the time? So one learning that we got is that no, it doesn't seem there's any holy grail in startup programs. The answer is always, it depends. When you ask what's the best model for me, well, it depends. It depends on your organization, on your objectives, on the status of the startup ecosystem that you can reach out to. And the beauty is that these are kind of products that can be designed. You don't need to go buy the book if you think that doesn't work for you. You have this design space available that has become clearer and clearer, to the point that people have already designed and changed the models a lot. And we believe this is going to continue, to the point that every organization, being so different in strategy, in internal governance and organizational issues itself, will and also its stage of maturity to working with startups, it will have a different way of instantiating these programs. And but the Holy Grail, another learning we have is that the Holy Grail is actually like in everything, is in alignment, in consistency. So if you create a program where everything is consistent, that's the secret. That's what works. And one thought about it, if you create an offering with the features that you see on the left, that will attract, like any other product, a very specific kind of segment within the startup ecosystem. It could attract idea team stages, whereas you need late stage startups, or vice versa. And you will then create a partnership, whoever comes in the program. The point is, or you'll be able to, the point is, does that partnership achieve the objectives that you had for startups, for the startup partnership? The idea behind this is that obviously you want to start planning, like every product or every initiative, from the objectives that you have, and backward to what kind of startups can help you achieve those objectives, and then backward to what kind of features you're going to put in the program to attract those startups and make them work well with you. And this brings us to our strategy canvas. While we were researching, Adam may remember, we've had, I think, like 4, 5, 6, 7 different attempts of creating canvases. But at the end, we really understood that there are 3 things that many organizations didn't nail. That is the overlap, finding the sweet spot of this Venn diagram, the intersection of the organization itself, its strategy, its unique offer to the startups, its readiness level to working with startups. Maybe you want to start from an easier program before you and test the water with that before you commit to bigger programs. The governance within the company, internal politics, is marketing on board, is R&D on board, and so on. the objectives. So depending on the objective, whether you want to integrate external innovation or you want to find diversification opportunities or you want to enter different markets, these are very different objectives that can be targeted with different structures and different startups, and the metrics that go with them obviously change as well. And the payback period, if you want results in one year, that's going to be different than 10 years required by corporate venture capital. The learning you want to get, because sometimes, as I said, you may want to prepare your organization for a more advanced program to come later on. And third point is the startup ecosystem. So the maturity level there, the technology, the expertise that can bring, and the motives. Now, if you can combine this, if you can understand the context, so these three big circles, then you can design a program. But starting with a program doesn't always work if it doesn't match the context. And let me give you an example, which I'd like to develop with Frank, because he's an expert of growing organizations. So there are different goals and different types of programs, and some of them have nailed it. There are programs that are that align with startups by having a common goal, that is the growth of the startup itself. And the corporate venture capital sometimes does it, sometimes doesn't. One case where, at least in their claims and what they communicate, it's been done, it's Intel Capital, where the strategy was, or has been recently, to invest in startups that can grow, and by growing, they affect positively Intel's core business. That doesn't mean they need to be integrated. It could be actually startups that promote a standard that Intel is interested in, or they stimulate demand for Intel products. And that doesn't require any integration. So the growth of the startup is going to affect the growth of Intel without any integration. So this is kind of a sweet spot of corporate venture capital that works very well by keeping alignment in the long term with the startup on the same goal. Now, that's also a third learning I'm going to give you, that is, a lot of the programs we have surveyed, and we looked at more than 450 programs, almost 500 to write this book. It is that a lot of them plan very well the recruitment and the activation stage, but not so well the follow-on stage. That is actually where most corporations tend to fail. So once you close a partnership, then what happens? How do you integrate that technology? How do you grow the startup? How do you support it to grow more? How do you develop an ecosystem based on your platform, if that's the goal, and so on? Our take is that in design, it's really important to start from this stage and then maybe have walk backward. I think I've spoken enough, and this is the last slide. These are our 2 contact emails. You can reach us there, and Adam really likes this, so he asked me to put if you like this presentation and you want to know more, we're going to give you half an hour online session with one of us for free if you take a photo of your canvas and send it to us by the end of today. Right, and that's our website. I think I'm finished.
Super, thanks a lot, Paolo. Could we go back from screen sharing? There we are.
Sure.
Friendly people there. Adam, anything to add?
Yes, I have a new gimmick other than the canvas. I wasn't going to pander for reviews, but I think we need some 4-star honest reviews to give us some street cred. So I think, like you said,
I could do that.
Like you said, it's all good things happen in debate, and so you can't please everyone. So yes, that was my other gimmick. But gimmicks over. Let's get back to the book.
Okay. So Andrea asked, Andrea, would you mind coming on mic and ask your question directly in the chat?
Yeah, sure, Frank. So when you presented the funnel, it was interesting to see, of course, the different phases of engaging with startups. So I was wondering if you have any tips on the most effective way of engaging with them on one side during the recruitment phase, and on the other side, how to keep in touch and keep them engaged during the follow-on stage. So we have tried different things such as LinkedIn groups, emails, one-to-ones, and we were wondering whether there is any golden rule there.
So I'll be bold, and I hate to, I have in mind the world did not need another canvas, but we really pushed. We were inspired by the Japanese Ikigai. If anyone's seen that, the reason for living. Do you mind sharing quickly your organization, who you are, the job to be done? So we're both also big fans of jobs to be done. So that was sort of circle 2, and then the type of startups. I think it's really important. We're seeing all different types of specialization right now because, our definition of startups was just external, but you could have students, you can have 2 folks in the garage, you have scientists, you have social impact entrepreneur, it's so wide ranging. And that's why Paolo and I we got really passionate about, well, it depends, but we don't feel like that's a cop-out answer, because as long as there's balance, we do feel like we're at least, drawing a line that there is an answer. It's not always, it depends, but there's the balance. So if you don't mind, and I'll try not to take too much time, quick organization, job to be done. It's not always, chasing unicorns. Sometimes, there's acquiring new technology, equity, environment, culture, job creation. And then who do you think you're
Yeah, absolutely. So quickly, me and Jessica here on the call as well. We come from the University of Zurich Biomed Entrepreneurship team. Job to be done is basically to provide coaching and training to aspiring life science entrepreneurs that would like to bring their innovations from the lab to the market. So by the training, we hope that we help them avoid common mistakes, get access to key learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. So on the recruitment phase, they are very much scientists thinking about the business, but on the follow-on phase, some of these are, start to be established startups that already have some investment from VCs and so on.
So I think the short answer is, go ahead, Paolo.
Well, I think, I'll let you speak, Adam, but I have direct experience of this, actually. So here, the question with scientists is that they don't have role models. Some of them think the reason why they became scientists was not to start a company. Otherwise, they would be entrepreneurs since day one, right? So you want to create role models for them in the communication. First of all, before even going out and start a call for interest, by showing scientists that actually have a big impact on the world, thanks to technology transfer and the fact that they sacrifice their academic career and academic dream to have like social impact or economic impact throughout through this startup activity. So that's a first piece of advice. You have to create a relationship that starts very early on, before the call. And the other, for the follow-on, it is like everyone else there. You probably want to, you probably want just to stay in touch, because if you are university, I suppose you don't take equity, so that's not a way to link yourself to them. But so keeping in touch means tap on your alumni network. So have them come and speak to the other scientists. Have them come and select people to enter your system, your program, and try to create a mentor opportunities for them as mentors, or to meet again the mentors of your program later on. And that is going to open the way for you to actually get updates, because that's not a problem, I guess. You have that you don't know your impact 3 years after, because startups stop answering your emails. So, but if you create these occasions and you create a relationship, that is what I I see it may work.
Do we have time for one more question? I think there's a very interesting one from Mass. Did I get this right? You want to come on mic?
Yeah. Hope you can hear me.
Yes.
So so I was just hanging on to your and thank you for the presentation. So I was listening to the element on the follow-on activities. Like so I guess we can all create interventions, and I think we pretty much have figured out how to scout and source and maybe do matchmaking and design pilots and execute pilots. But I think we are sort of in that process. We are somehow accumulating, let's call it organizational debt in a way that someone needs to pay off. And it's not the innovating team that are going to pay that off. It's in the organization. So we're dealing with this constant flow of change where traditional change management is just not going to cut it. So I was just looking for some pointers or maybe expertise or hubs or some people in the world who are passionate about this question and maybe have some advice.
2 minutes, please, Paolo and Adam. Is there a short answer, Paolo?
Well, short answer is that you have a few passionate people here in this room, beyond Adam and myself, Frank, absolutely. But in the other, the point is that one of our interviewees said internal innovation teams should walk more the corridors of the corporation rather than the startup ecosystem, the corridors in the startup ecosystem, meaning that what you said is totally right. You fall into risk to fall into the pilot trap, where you actually do a lot of pilots and then nothing happens because the organization is not ready. There are programs, we mentioned venture client that is going to be covered in another talk later in this on Thursday conference. Yes, but other programs also, Frank, what you do that actually tackle specifically the preparation of the organization before you even start looking for startups, right? So, and for that's a learning we got for innovation sourcing or solution sourcing. That's what you need to do before even starting. You need to make sure that at least the business, the problem owner is there and active and has budget to commit to a follow-on to the pilot. It has the structure, maybe engineering is on board, or to actually go on. But I'll let Adam talk now, and I'm sure.
Well, there's
you can add something.
Just a second, Adam. I'm double checking, Max. We do have time until 45 past the hour, right?
Yeah. So like 40,
because in my meeting invite it only said going to 30 minutes past the hour.
Sorry,
okay, that's fine. Adam, back to you. So that.
All right. I like how you strategically went, when you thought we were short on time, you went to Paolo. I think that was a smart move on your part, but now, so I won't suck up too much time. I heard two questions there. I heard a cultural question, and then I heard a more tactical question of integration. I think there's a quote in the book, we have more pilots than Delta or a European airline of your choice. I think what's beautiful about this and what Paolo was alluding to, if you think about it, an actual sort of feature change, demo day is this placeholder. It's sort of this common theme. But when people started to realize that there was this integration problem, that you needed to sort of, preload the business units, demo day switched from a demo day to sort of a matchmaking between the core, the not made here syndrome is addressed head on by either putting the core businesses on the selection committee or having a demo day where they're pitching, they're making that relationship early. So I think it was one of these if-then statements where you sort of have the placeholder of a demo day, but the adaptation came when demo day was switched to sort of meeting the core business to literally solve the not made here syndrome. So there's little feature adaptations like that if you know exactly what you're trying to solve for, the feature changes become obvious like that one.
And there are also programs where the demo day or the matchmaking actually happens at the beginning of the program, at the very beginning, and they are usually programs that collect more than one company from kind of the same sectors, so that you also have your competitors at the table. So if you're really interested, you're gonna push to get a relationship with the startup. But it seems it really works much better than the classic demo day of accelerators at the end. Doing it at the beginning sets the stage very well.
Mm-hmm. Would you want me to chip in with one of the comments that I have, Paolo? Okay. So I'm coming from, as I said, from the question, how can corporates build new businesses? And this deals with corporate startups, meaning from some entrepreneurship programs, some corporate mavericks that burn for their idea, but also applies to greenfield startups from the outside that the company takes in and scales it to leverage, to multiply the size of its investment, and obviously to also the technologies that these bring. So what the 20 companies and 2 business schools that co-created the lean scale-up has found as best practice is to say there needs to be a dedicated phase between, let's say, honeymoon, right? The POCs, the getting to know each other, do the market testing, that kind of phase, and the actual making it big stage, scaling up, many, as it is called by many companies. And in this phase, you basically need to install a gearbox between the corporate startup or the external startup and align it. You've got 2 value creation systems under one roof, right? The day-to-day business and the new stuff, right? Coming from the inside or coming from the outside. And if you dive deeper, then what's going on in this phase? We see 3 major streams. Adam, it's the organizational debt. Right, and other debts that are still open. Are we really scalable when it comes to go-to-market or the technology, etc., that kind of stuff, right? That needs to be taken care of in the subsequent scaling up phase. Number 2, and that's the decisive point, is you align. And it turns out that the trick is to get that external startup or the internal startup into the systems that trigger the organizational behavior of the core of the day-to-day business. Turns out, Mass, that they are so-called PM systems, right? A lot of systems that have a P and an M: performance management, portfolio management, process management, product management, etc. And you need to weave in the new stuff into this target system so that you get the corporate support. Anything to add from you, Paolo? Adam?
Yeah, that's absolutely perfect. I understand everything you said. So that's kind of basically what we mean by planning the follow-on stage to the program before you even, as part of the program planning. I mean, that's part of the program design. One of the common mistakes is, as Max, you said, it seems like the innovation team doesn't take responsibility of that because it should be the company. There's that division there that is not as black and white. In fact, it shouldn't be black and white. It should be that the innovation team that is part of the company helps create that follow-on stage as part of program planning before starting. So that gearbox that Frank was mentioning should come even before you start the first call for startups if you want. Obviously, it's not always possible. Maybe you want to pilot one part of the program before the other one is started, because otherwise you would wait for 3 years before you get the budget approval, et cetera. So there are tactics that go through that learning. So you can create a program that as an objective has learning, and that's actually communicated to the executive leadership. So we're doing a pilot program where we're going to test our recruitment and activation stage, but there won't be any integration here because we didn't get the approval from engineering to commit resources yet. But you get the role the ball rolling in the meantime. So there are tactics you can apply there, but you definitely want to get to the point where you plan that follow-on stage before you run the real program.
Any more questions from the audience? I do have one, Paolo and Adam. I mean, you researched some 500 programs. I think that was the figure that you mentioned. Which one impressed you most? Right? We understood the message. There's no one size fits it all, no best program, quote unquote. But which impressed you most and why?
Oh, this is a tough one.
That's why we.
I mean,
I think so. It would be unjust to do good name dropping here, but
I have a couple. I'll take that. This is no disrespect to anyone I'm not naming, but yeah, I mean, Startup Chile was, I'll go a little. Startup Chile was, I think, what influenced some of Tech Peaks. So they reinvented a model, and I think they've also evolved from the job to be done from, Techstars obviously created, we've been following them a lot recently. Techstars stands out and created, and along with Y Combinator, created this sort of shell of this model. But I think Startup Chile stands out because they sort of started the ball rolling in this adaptation in terms of like, they're going to use the framework of an accelerator, but for a different purpose, instead of just to find unicorns or to make money, for job creation. And they use the same formula for a different purpose. And I think even internally, Paolo, we remember they went from job creation to this, what was their second thesis?
It was economical growth of Chile.
Right.
The first part was cultural, and the second part was job creation, actually. Yeah.
So my answer for now is Startup Chile, I think, sort of set the standard. Then obviously there were some Microsoft programs that also the job to be done was different. It was not necessarily ROI, but I think with their ecosystem and sort of giving, they were explicit about what the role was, not to create unicorns or to create ROI, but to create a healthy ecosystem on Microsoft platforms. And so that was consistent and aligned and balanced. And then, of course, I would have to mention, the World Food Program, they started with one accelerator, and now I think they're up to 30 programs, and they're doing good work for the world. So that's what I call the Chapter 6, like an impact related program. I have to mention some of those as well.
And Paolo,
I feel bad if I left anyone out.
Paolo, which ones impressed you most?
Yeah, I think I can only reinforce what Adam said. Programs that are very well aligned and consistent are very impressive, because there's a lot of design that went there. There's another one, I won't say the name, but it's in the book, where they planned to create an ecosystem around their technology platform. And the way they did it, they actually created they took briefs from internal units that wanted an addition to the technology platform. At the beginning, they really had to push for obtaining those briefs, because people said, "Oh, startups will never bring anything." But then thanks to those briefs, they identified the startups. They created success cases that were pushing the use of the platform. That to the point that year 2 or 3, they started having too many contacts from internal units and too many briefs, so they couldn't run as many call for startups for all the internal units that were actually seeing success in other stories and wanted to replicate that for their units. So when you get that alignment of features, then that's when it works. And when people say we tried corporate accelerator and it didn't work for us, well, did you ask yourself why it didn't work for us? What did you copy paste another program without adapting it? That usually is one of the reasons why it didn't work. And because you didn't make sure that the features were aligned with your context.
Okay, I've got one more question from my side, Paolo, please, a short one. And then another one from Brett in the chat. How do we know when the features that you want to design into that startup program, the funding, the education, the mentorship, the follower, are actually aligned? Is that just a mental exercise that you look at it, or do you have litmus tests and where you can easily judge, guys, this is not fully aligned?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, it can come from a few things. So you actually look at models and people who already tried some features of that model, if that would work there or not, your own experience, and then testing. So exactly what you would do with another product. So, and both Adam and I come from the lean validation and lean startup movement. So what do you probably want to do if you have big uncertainty, whether those features are aligned or consistent, you want to invest less, do a smaller program, test only one part, for example, the recruitment, by doing a challenge before you do an accelerator, or doing an accelerator before you commit to a corporate venture fund, and so on, so that you understand with the lower investment whether there's consistency. I'll close. You said to be brief.
Okay. So coming to Brett's question, what are the ramifications of Y Combinator's pullback from late-stage startup investing to focus on its core accelerator program?
This is today's news, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. So Y Combinator, because, I mean, the claim is that it's not related to Silicon Valley Bank crash, but Y Combinator announced today, yesterday, or Friday that they would reduce their investments to only from late stage to early stage. Now, it's debated why they actually did it. And the ramifications, I think, they are, Y Combinator has always been started as a very early stage investor. So I don't expect a big negative impact on the startup ecosystem by actually YC refocusing on their main core business. So I'll give it to Adam for
Adam, short one. We have 1 minute left.
I'll double back and answer the. I think Paolo nailed it with the features and validation and testing. And then when we first started writing the book, I was mindful not to just force the lean startup, product management, but it's just like any other product. And so if you have a marketing hypothesis about how to attract startups, test that. If you have the demo day adaptation and you think you're trying to test and you have a hypothesis, test that. And if you do that independently, yes, you can use the framework, but it's your job to start making the balance is up to you, and test those things independently. And I think you'll succeed.
Okay. So thank you very much, Paolo and Adam, for being with us, with the audience. Startup Program Design is the name of the book. It's 100% 5 stars at Amazon. And Max, you already pasted the link to the next session in the chat window. So hope you get a lot of value out of this session, and looking forward to see you shortly then. All the best. Famous last words, Paolo and Adam.
Well, thank you very much, Frank. Thank you, Innovators, for having us here.
Okay. See you soon. Goodbye.